Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our first Pride Perspective of the school year. My name is Meredith Timone, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Admission. On behalf of all of our panelists, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn more about what makes the Trinity-Pawling community so special. Our panel this evening will run for about 45 minutes. So if there's any reason that you need to sign off before that, please feel free to do so. Our topic this evening is on the importance of educating boys, and it truly is at the heart of why everyone here on this panel tonight has chosen to be a part of this amazing community. And I'm confident that their dedication to our school will shine through. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. And for anyone who wants to submit a question in real time this evening, please use the Q&A feature. If for some reason we run out of time and we're unable to answer your question, someone from the admissions office will be directly in touch with you tomorrow. So before we dive into our topic, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Starting with our students, we first have Cristobal Tola. And give a little wave. He's a senior from Ontario, Canada. He's in his second year here at Trinity-Pawling. And in that short time, he's accomplished being elected our head prefect. He's an integral part of our hockey and track teams, as well as a very dedicated tour guide. Next, we have Maddox Rivera. Give a little wave. Okay, he's an 11th grade student. He's from Pine Bush, New York. Maddox is in his first year, so he's come in with a fresh set of eyes. He's our talented soccer goalie, and he's also in a few of our clubs on campus. Lastly, we have Casey Sadolski. He is a senior, and he's in his third year. He comes from Heartland, Wisconsin. And similar to Cristobal, after being here for a short 2 years, he was elected as a prefect and a dorm proctor. He's a key member of our soccer and lacrosse teams, as well as one of our head tour guides. So representing our faculty tonight, I'll start with Josh Collins. Josh is an alumnus from the class of '95. He's our Dean of Students, and he's also a member of our science department. He coaches baseball. He lives on campus with his family, including his son, who is currently a senior here. Next, we have Elizabeth Moore. She's a member of our English department. She's a dorm parent. She's a coach for our basketball and track teams, and she's involved with our student senate and debate club. Next, we have Josh Frost. He's also an alumnus. Josh is from the class of '94. He's the chair of our modern languages department, and he teaches Spanish and somehow finds time to teach a woodworking elective. He's the head of our very cool varsity farming program. He lives on campus with his family, including his wife, Ashley, who's also on our faculty in our Center for Learning Achievement. And finally, we have Bill Taylor, our head of school. Bill's been our head of school since 2015. And prior to that, he served as the head of school for a co-ed school for 14 years. And interestingly enough, prior to that, he was here at Trinity-Pawling for 13 years, assuming various positions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill so he can jump right in and talk a little bit about why this topic tonight is of such great importance to us.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you to all of you who are joining this evening for taking some of your valuable time to learn more about what we're doing here at Trinity-Pawling. I think this is a very important, timely issue of the importance of educating boys. And it's unfortunately getting more important and more timely. This year, if you are enrolling and if you're a college freshman, the statistics, the ratio of women to men in college is 60% to 40% for women in the freshman year of college to men. A long time ago, when I was a freshman in college, that ratio was about 50-50. Women were, maybe beginning to get to 51% to 49% of, in that ratio. So in a period of 40 years, it's it has gotten very, very vast in terms of the difference. In 1972, there was a 13% difference in college degrees going to men versus those that were going to women. In 2019, there was a 15% of college degrees going to women versus college degrees going to men. That's a 28% swing in about a 40-year, close to 50-year period. So what's going on with that? Certainly a big part of that is Title IX and the improvements in education for women, particularly at the college level, and that's all very, very positive. But there are other things going on to see why the number of men in college is declining as rapidly as it is. If you look at some more of the statistics, girls now account for 2/3 of high school students in the top 10% of overall student population ranked by GPA. If you look at the top 16 law schools in this country, and you look at their law reviews, all 16 of them had women editors in 2020. 50% of the doctorate degrees in medicine, law, dentistry were earned by women in 2019. In 1972, that number was 7%. So these are very important, very timely advances for women, and that is all very, very positive. But if you look at what's going on with the men in college, more men than women by a double-digit figure are not likely to complete college. So you have fewer men going to college, and then you have, by a double-digit figure, more men than women not completing college. So there's that, and that translates into a higher unemployment rate for men versus women. And there's a lot of research and speculation as to what is going on here, other than the advances in Title IX. And you don't have to look very far in terms of the brain science to know what's going on, because we've known for about 30 years when, with the MRI technology allows us to look more clearly at brain development, that the maturation of the boy brain in adolescence is about 2 to 3 years behind the maturation of girls' brains in adolescence. And that maturation has to do with things that are going on with with the synapse connectivity, things that are important to how you store and retain information, for example. So the bottom line translation is that during adolescence, during the high school years, girls' brains are more efficient than boys' brains in terms of the accumulation of knowledge. That doesn't mean that that doesn't level out later. It does, but it begins to level out in the early 20s. And so in the boys' brains, there's that 2 to 3 year lag translates into sometimes a higher degree of impulsivity, and sometimes a longer time in changing direction. And there's a wonderful quote from a book that I'm getting a lot of this information. The book is called Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, but he's got a wonderful quote speaking about, from the boy perspective. And that quote is that when we were young, we snuck out of bed to go to parties. When we got older, we snuck out of parties to go to bed. And he talks about there's more acceleration of the brain in adolescence with regard to impulsivity and less braking power to slow that energy down. His suggestion, and one that's repeated by a number of people, is to have boys delay school for a little bit, or to repeat a year in high school to allow that brain maturation to catch up. And I think there's some great advantages in that. My own son did a pre-first grade between kindergarten and adolescence. But there's also something else going on other than just brain maturation. In 1980, boys who were in high school, who were high school seniors, were more likely than their girl classmates to say that they would complete their college degree. In 2000, in just 20 years, there was a total shift in this. So it was more girls saying that they were going to be more likely to finish their college degree. And that has nothing to do with brain maturation. That has a lot to do with how we do school for both boys and girls. Beginning in the 1980s, in schools, particularly in public schools, you saw a large increase in standardized testing. A lot of standards-based education became the norm. And for school districts to understand how they were, how students were doing with these standards, you tested more. And that required, students to be able to retain and then give information back in a way that reflected memorization, that reflected being able to take tests well, and so forth. And school became more standardized, and in many cases, sadly, it became less relevant for students. When I was in high school a long time ago, there was far more autonomy. I had far more choices in what classes I was taking. That autonomy doesn't really happen as much anymore. And in terms of what adolescents want, whether they be boys or girls, they want more autonomy. They want to be able to see relevance in things. And that is important for both boys and girls. So I think what that is saying is that we need to be very cognizant of how boys are learning. And one of the advantages here at Trinity-Pawling is that we're experts in boys' education. One of my common summaries of education is that I'm not a big fan of rigor. I'm a big fan of challenge, but rigor to me seems rigid, it seems imposing, and it seems to be encapsulating. I'm much more of a proponent of vigor, which is really about unleashing the energy from within. And one thing that teenage boys have is lots of energy. And so one of the things that we're trying to do at Trinity-Pawling is to create avenues for learning that tap into that energy, that rely on that energy, that create more opportunities for our autonomy, where the boys feel more, more relevance in their learning. So, we have lots of project-based learning woven through the curriculum. We have our practicum for civic leadership, which is a graduation requirement that emphasizes critical thinking, creativity, communication, teamwork in ways that are also designed to promote self-awareness, where the students can have a little bit more control about what they're learning. They can choose which project they want to do. They have a senior independent project by the time they're seniors. That's all their choice. It's all autonomy. And we also have these institutes for active learning, where the students are getting outside on Saturdays, getting out. We used to have classes on Saturdays, and now we are doing things around the themes of leadership, entrepreneurialism, environmental stewardship, and citizenship. And there are very engaging, active oriented ways that boys are learning about those 4 themes that are very relevant in today's world and very relevant for the 21st century. So all of that is why I think this is such a timely topic here. And I think I might just throw this out to Miss Moore, because she's in her first year here at Trinity-Pawling, and having spent the last couple of years teaching in public schools. So, certainly without trying to make I'm not asking you to make a qualitative assessment of difference, but how, Ms. Moore, do you see the way boys are learning where you were teaching before, and certainly here at Trinity-Pawling? What differences do you see?
Yeah, well, coming from a public school, I see a huge difference in the way that classrooms are expected to be run. I think historically and presently, a lot of classrooms in our country, especially public schools, are expected to be very rigid, very strict, desks in a row facing forward, and learning in that I talk, you listen kind of way. But here it's really nice to see that all the teachers kind of have the freedom to, and are actually kind of encouraged to think outside the box when they're planning and implementing lessons. And so we, as teachers, have permission for our classrooms to be loud and for our classrooms to have fun, because we're not really teaching to a standardized test. We're teaching in a way that makes sure that boys are learning in the best way that they possibly can. So it's really nice to watch productive, active learning happening in an environment like that. Like just last week, Maddox and his classmates were running around campus doing the Amazing Race for me, and it was fun, and they were able to have fun, and he came back sweating a little bit, and but in the meantime they were learning, and it was kind of served as a barometer for me to see where students were at with the book that we're reading right now. And that's something that I wasn't able to do at my public school. So I see a big difference in the way that teachers are allowed to run their classrooms.
Great. Hey, Maddox, tell us a little bit about that lesson or that experience. Tell us more about that, running around campus during your English class.
So we're reading this book, Nothing But the Truth, and it was a Amazing Race, and it was like a Google form, and she'd like put prompts of like stuff that we had to do that's like about the book, but we were like up and running. It was very competitive because we're all competitive over here, and it was just a great way of learning and asking questions about the book rather than sitting down. We got to get up and move around. Very fun, and while we were having fun, we were learning too. So I think that was great.
Casey and Cristobal, I mean, you both, before you came here, you were not at all boys environments, right? So, what's the difference for you?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a school of like 2,500 kids, and about 40 kids per class, both guys and girls. And it was really easy for me to hide in the classroom, just because I was scared to answer a question. Maybe I would embarrass myself in front of a girl, or I'd be caught staring in class, just daydreaming about a girl. But here, my average class size, I would say, is about 8 guys. And it's really hard to hide. So you feel like you have to participate in the class. And that's really helped me advance as a student, participated in classes, and yeah.
Yeah, similar to Casey, I actually went to 2 co-ed schools, one in Canada and one in Pennsylvania prior to this. I definitely say, like Casey's saying, like the distraction part of things obviously isn't there, but there's also this kind of closely connected like brotherhood here where everyone, are boys and we're all competitive, like Maddox was saying in his English class. Like we all kind of have the same set goal and mindset, and we all kind of blend together despite our differences and where we come from. And whereas like in a co-ed school, it's very separated and selected, where the girls hang out and the boys hang out, and they're kind of separated in that sense. Whereas here, people are always blended together and working together and cooperating together. So that's a huge difference that I've seen, and it's really propelled my academic side of things further than I've ever thought it could have.
You all mentioned, competition. You all three happen to be varsity athletes, but, is everybody here a varsity athlete? Is everybody here, a college bound athlete?
Take it,
No, I
Casey.
mean, a great example. Yeah. Instead, you have to play as an upperclassman, you have to play two sports out of two out of three sports for each trimester. And I actually picked up playing JV soccer, something I would never expect to play. And I'm on a team with probably 8 kids from other countries that I would never expect to hang out with. And we just go out there and have a great time. It's great to be on a sports team where you're not the best player. And the best players are kids that you've never met and you can learn from them. And they're just out there having fun with JV soccer, which is what I find really cool.
Yeah. Hey, Maddox. Oh, go ahead, Tristobal. Go
I was
ahead.
just say, building off of Casey, like I came here being only really thinking about being a hockey kid, but in the spring I got kind of pushed into doing track with Garrett Backus and Robbie Accomando, who's a senior last year, and I was definitely not one of the top runners on the squad. And like Casey was saying, there was people from all over the country, all over the world who ended up doing track, and it really like opened up who I knew and kind of my connections throughout the school. And it's amazing to see like all these other aspects of people like Garrett, who was insanely fast, probably one of our best runners, yet there was also people who just tried track for the first time and ended up being like amazing. Like I know Jackson, who is a sophomore last year, like just wanted to do it for fun and then ended up being on the varsity team just because he didn't know he had that talent in him. So yeah, no one here is gonna, not everyone here is gonna be like a D1 athlete or go professional, but it's like Casey was saying, it brings us all together and it's cool to see everyone's different side of things outside of the classroom.
Maddox, being new this year, how did you sort of experience this idea of brotherhood? How difficult or easy, or what was it like sort of coming here not knowing anybody?
Yeah, so well, I think for the soccer team, we had this really cool preseason, and it was in Costa Rica, which everyone loved, and I think that helped me through the kind of getting connected with everyone here. So that helped, and then coming to preseason with everyone here as well, which kind of like gave me an idea of how life was going to be like. Really helped. So, and then as the year went on, everyone's been very like supportive of each other. Like at chapel, we'd if like anywhere really, if someone's like collar was messed up, we'd fix their collar. Someone fixed my collar, and that was huge. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was crazy. And I started doing it to other people, and it just spreads like that. And it's great.
Mr. Collins and Mr. Frost. Mr. Collins, you graduated in the 20th century. Mr. Frost, you graduated in the 21st century in 2004. I'm sure this idea of camaraderie, the brotherhood, that is very similar, I would imagine, from your experience. But how is the learning environment different for you as a student versus as it is now for you as a teacher?
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in. I think about being here as a student, 25, 30 years ago. The soul of the school is very much the same. The brotherhood, camaraderie, the effort challenge, our friendships, all that, permeates through, decades. But the class setups, I look at it academically, we were in straight rows in the uncomfortable desks, and it was that lecture form of class. And, how much could you remember? That has really evolved to now roundtables, discussions, going outside. We had to beg teachers to take us outside. And now it's going outside and sitting in groups and having those discussions. The experiential learning stuff, which, we didn't have a lot of that at that point, and we've really evolved and we've moved. You keep that piece of the traditional curriculum, but also then moving into what we're doing now with the project-based learning and our SIPs, global collaborative challenges and winter projects, institutes, all that stuff. So we've really transitioned from my time as a student, and it makes it more fun to teach and gives us more latitude in terms of teaching the material. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I would add that I was a day student, and if any of you are watching and are planning on potentially being a day student, I would say too that the most successful day students that I can remember are the ones who do everything that a boarder does here except sleep. That they're here for dinner and they're here for clubs and they hang out in the dorms, and I didn't do enough of that as a student. So I always try to share that with my advisees who are day students and say that the more time you spend here, the more you're going to get out of it. So I always encourage people to do that. I would say one difference that comes to my mind in instruction is in language classes, and I'm the chair of this department, so I'm thinking about this often. But I remember Spanish classes, and I took Latin as well, but where I really had to just memorize information. And that was the goal, to memorize and spit it out. And it was the same in history and science and math. And it was all about, taking in information, organizing it, and then being able to give it back for an assessment. And that has changed significantly. And in language classes, we're not asking kids to memorize the language. We know from current research that doesn't really produce fluency. And so we're working on actually just using the language, which means that class can be a whole lot more fun. And we're not all watching the clock to see when it's going to be over because it's a grammar lesson that's incredibly boring. We're acting, we're reading books, we are playing games, and if I'm asking kids about the weekend, maybe I'm asking them to stand up and answer with their bodies and move to one side of the room or the other. And so there's a lot of movement, and we try to incorporate it in all of our lessons. But it's very much more active and more fun because we're using the language. And I have to think that as I walk around, I watch my colleagues teaching that it's the same sort of principle. We're moving away from asking kids to simply memorize and looking more to see what kind of skills we can develop, things that they can do. So yeah, and of course we get to see a whole different side of kids when we have our Saturday programming, or for the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which I always remember was 15 days of a flurry of studying. It was its own marking period. It was a high stress period, and now we're doing something different with the winter session, and I'm looking forward to hopefully helping some students with their SIP, their senior independent projects. I know there's some welding on the horizon, and making Casey wants to potentially make a dining room table, and so we're talking about all these things now, but really looking forward to that time of year. That did not exist when I was a student.
Casey and Cristobal, did you enjoy the winter session last year? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the winter session was definitely something new for me, being a new student last year. Didn't really know what to expect. Last year I was part of the GCC. I didn't do an SIP, which was our group collaborative project. But it was something I thought was very surprisingly helpful to me. Like, hearing about it was just like, oh, like you just have to do this presentation for 2 weeks. Like, oh, it'll be fine. But I was in a group with a whole bunch of different kids, and CRF, who was a teacher last year, and like I was just able to pick information out of his brain because he was so helpful, and we all kind of learned about this. Our project was about building this plan about food insecurity and how we could help in the States and better it. And we ended up coming with a whole bunch of actual plans and ideas that we hoped could actually get put forth. And we ended up, at the end of it, we ended up making this plan. We're like, wow, like this is actually pretty legit. Like, we were actually thinking of tweeting to who was it, Elon Musk, because there was a tweet that said if someone comes up with a plan, he'll donate money. And we're like, maybe we should actually tweet to him, see if he'd give us the money. But during that time, it was very, very helpful. It was a different way of learning, whereas you're with a group of guys and a teacher, and you have a set goal in mind, and you just all, each person has their own part in the presentation or the project, and you all come together to make this grand project and present it to everyone. And it's a really good life skill too, to be able to present to everyone. and share your ideas. So yeah, I thought it was an amazing time throughout those 2 weeks.
Last year I kind of had a unique situation, given it was my second junior year and I did my GCC the year before. So I actually co-taught a winter project for freshmen and sophomores. We did it on steam engines, and I wasn't too, I never really had interest in steam engines before I started teaching that class. So most of the two teachers that I co-taught with kind of picked my brains about ways to, the best ways I like to learn. And I use those ways to help teach the class. And we did a lot of this by hands-on learning instead of just presentations. I know a lot of the time at my old schools, it was a lot of presentation, the teacher talking to us, telling it how it's going to be. And here during that winter project, we did pretty much all hands-on learning. And then we ended up going to a museum and seeing a steam engine at work. So it was awesome.
Simone, what other questions have come in?
Sure, we've had some really great questions come in. The first that I'll ask, and really anybody and everyone can answer this, is how do you feel that the all-boys school has prepared you for the real world, where there are, of course, girls? Maybe the boys, you guys want to start?
Or the graduates?
Or the graduates, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, definitely like being at an all boys school. Yeah, no, I'm good. In the sense of like the realistic part of, yeah, like the world is involved with boys and girls, but here I feel being an all boys school, we're able to like really focus in on ourselves and kind of figure out who we are as a person without that intimidation factor of, being a young teenager and wanting to impress a girl in your class or a crush you have, like that always puts on pressure on a young teenager. And here you don't really have that, you don't, like Casey was saying before with our class sizes, you can't really hide. So it builds that kind of a sense of confidence and a sense of being able to, speak for yourself. And in the real world, no one's going to speak upon yourself except you, like you got to speak for yourself. So in that side of things, I feel like that's a very important aspect that you need to learn. And another thing that I think a lot of people, even at our school, don't even understand until leaving, and I'm sure Mr. Frost and Mr. Collins could agree, that just the way we dress and prepare ourselves. I know when they went here, they had to do coat and tie almost every single day, but the way we present ourselves here is very, very important in the real world. People here are just like, oh, it's dress code, but when you're out in the real world, you want to look clean. You want to know how to be able to put on a tie, to wear a coat, to even wear like what Maddox is wearing, a golf shirt, and like tucked in. You don't want to have a loose shirt. Like when you go into a business meeting, you know how to prepare yourself. You know how to look confident and do an interview properly. And here, I feel like that's a skill that is forced upon us, but is something that is very helpful for us in the outside world for sure.
I would say that's a really tough to follow up. I think,
Yeah.
I think you did a really nice job. And I would actually agree with a lot of that in terms of building that confidence in the classroom. To where I got to college, and with women in the classroom, I had that confidence to raise my hand and take a risk in the class. And if I was wrong, I was wrong, but I wasn't, I wasn't shy about taking control of, the learning process for me and asking questions and that kind of thing. So I think it helped me a lot.
Anyone else have anything to add? All right, we'll move on to the next. So somebody is curious to know our percentage of male to female educators. Bill, is this something you want to touch upon?
Sure. I think when we look at these numbers, we probably have 45 men who are teaching, and that includes administrators who are teaching, and 18 women who include administrators who are teaching, and women faculty. So it's slightly more than a third of the faculty here are women. And I would say that that ratio is true on our board of trustees. Slightly over a third of our board members are women.
Thank you. Another question coming in is, how do we support the development of executive functioning skills?
Well, we have a whole program, the Center for Learning Achievement, that is sort of a school within a school on executive functioning skills, but also language-based learning differences and so forth. So that's something that we've been doing for many years, and we do it very well. And it's fully integrated within the overall learning environment here in curriculum.
And somebody else is asking about critical thinking skills. How do we develop those in our boys?
Oh, in many different ways. We've actually talked about some of them. I mean, when Maddox was talking about what he did in Miss Moore's critical English class, that was critical thinking skills. It's just done in an active way. The practicum in all the different the global collaborative challenge that Cristobal talked about, that is all critical thinking skills. I mean, what that exercise is that students have to look at a real world problem and then understand why it's a problem and who's affected by the problem, and then come up with creative solutions to solve the problem. And that's all critical thinking skills. I think, if you look at the institutes that we're doing, Mr. Frost, you're leading up the environmental stewardship, institute. I know you've done projects of creating maple syrup with trees on campus. I mean, those, may not seem to be exercises in critical thinking, but they actually are very heavily emphatic on critical thinking.
Yeah, I would add that it's for me, it's a mindset, and I at farming practice or in the Spanish classroom or in a winter project, I'm not simply giving answers and looking for kids to be able to regurgitate it. As I said earlier, I'm saying, hey guys, here's the issue. How do we get from point A to point B? And I'm, if it takes them, we may not have a very productive day at farming because it took them half an hour to figure it out, but I'm giving them the opportunity to think about the problem and sort of guide them as they work through different ways to solve it. So yeah, it's pretty practical up at the farm, but in language class, it's the same thing. It's not simply conjugating verbs. We're talking about immigration in Spanish 4 and talking about challenges for migrants or something like that. And it's more of a discussion about trying to get them to think and work through issues rather than simply ask them to reproduce information on an assessment.
Yeah, those are just examples of ways that we're teaching critical thinking, often in experiences where the students may not even realize that they're employing critical thinking skills. And we still do the other traditional ways too, like learning how to write a thesis and develop an antithesis, or do research on that, or do lab experiments. Those ways of teaching critical thinking that we have in common with other schools. We've just developed a whole host of different avenues to do in ways that really tap into how boys learn best, and to develop those critical thinking skills in ways that really resonate for boys.
Can the boys talk a little bit about dorm life and what do you do on the weekend?
I'll start. I'm bored. I live like an hour from the school, so I have the luxury of being able to go home on the weekends. But sometimes I like staying home or staying in the dorm with my friends, and oftentimes, I think every week, I've gotten like an email of like weekend activities that we do, and sometimes they're like going to like shopping. There's Acme across the street. There's I know there's mini golf, which is like a fun activity that we can all do, stuff like that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I'll touch on that. The dorm life, I would say, is probably the most fun part of the school. aside from competing in the sports. Just going back and having a spot to hang out with all of your buddies. It's like a big sleepover every night. You get to hang out with all your friends. We have cookouts in Barstow a lot. We have a fire pit that we all hang out around. I know last fall we brought a TV out by the fire pit. We had a big cookout, brats, burgers, watched some Friday or Saturday night football. Just had a good time. We've also gone to apple patches and we've gone or apple orchards and we've gone to pick apples, then later caramelizing them. We've also done pumpkin carving as a dorm. And last Halloween, we even made Barstow a Halloween haunted house. And all the faculty kids came around and walked through, and it was just a good time, getting everybody involved and really just having a good time whenever we're here.
What about
Yeah.
the Dorm Olympics? You just want to talk really briefly about what you organized recently?
Yeah, so one thing that I really wanted to focus on as being a prefect is trying to bring back traditions or starting new traditions. And something that we did last Thursday was a Dorm Olympics. We had 2 divisions, an underclassmen and an upperclassman, and we did a bunch of activities with the whole school down there, and it really brought everybody together. It was kind of the first activity this school year that everybody was together in one place, having a fun time. So everybody had really good feedback for it. So I'm hoping to do events like this as we move forward in the year.
Okay, so this is a really sort of big question, and everybody talked a little bit before about why all boys, but maybe boys, you can start with this. Why Trinity-Pawling? What is it that during your search process really stood out and made you feel like this was the right fit? This was going to be your home for the rest of high school?
Yeah, I could go on that. A huge part of the reason I came here was because of the athletics. I mean, I came here for hockey, but I also heard about TP from actually a family friend who had 2 sons come here, and they said that just the way their sons entered the school and the way they exited was like 2 different people, and for the better, of course. And the active learning and like the style of learning here was unlike any other school they've ever experienced. And I just, every time we would have dinner with them, they would always talk about it. So of course, me and my dad reached out to Coach Farrar. It's for the hockey program, but then I also learned more about like the academic side. And instantly when I visited here, actually Coach Gilman, who is one of the teachers who runs the lead program, was the first teacher and coach I met here. And the way he approached me and the way he confronted me and showed me around the buildings and showed me how things ran, like it was a shock on how like the school ran, and like it was engaging and it was interesting, and I wanted to see it in action. And when my first week here, I remember last year, instantly like all the faculty were like engaged in not only your academic life but in your personal lives too. Like they wanted the best for you, they wanted to see you succeed, and they do anything to help you get there. Whereas you go to public school, 3 o'clock hits and you don't see them till the next day at 7 in the morning. Like here, most of our faculty live on campus and they're able to help, and they give extra help almost every single night. You just have to ask, and it builds your communication skills. But it's a great thing to see here, and seeing it in person was unreal.
I think a big thing that helped me for the tour here, I've seen other private schools, and they're like very big. Like some of them, they have a lot more students than us, and it's probably like maybe like up to a 10-minute walk in some schools. Whereas this, I don't think there's more than like a 5-minute walk, or like a 4-minute walk anywhere. And another good part about it being small is that like everyone knows their names. Like I go through the halls saying hi to all of my friends. I don't think there's one person that I don't know their names. The faculty is amazing. They all know my name, and especially what Crystal said, like with the teachers living on campus, and if you could just communicate with them, they help so much, like either homework, if you don't get what you're doing, they're very, very good at that.
Thank you. Well, we, I think, have surpassed our 45-minute mark. Does anybody have any final words of wisdom or anything that they'd like to add before we sign off tonight?
I'll just add one thing, because, this is I guess my 22nd year of being a head of school. So 14 years were spent in a co-ed environment that was a very special school, and it was very student-centered, very similar in that sense to Trinity-Pawling. But as somebody who's seen both, there's a difference between the boys here and the boys at my previous school, and it's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable. And the difference is this: that at an all-boys school, there's a different layer or depth of willingness to be vulnerable. That it's sort of there's an extra space in that continuum here at Trinity-Pawling for the boys. And what you get with that extra space is the ability to get to know yourself better, and to begin to figure out what your gifts are, what your talents are, because you're allowing yourself to be a little bit more vulnerable, because nobody really cares. You can take that risk. You could go out and play JV soccer when you haven't played JV soccer, and you're surrounded by kids who may be better, but nobody cares. You're having a good time. And so there's learning and there's self-awareness that comes out of that. And that's the all boys aspect that I can see at two very outstanding schools that are both highly student-centered. But there's still that difference. And I think that difference is what is needed when you look at some of the importance of how we need to be educating boys.
Well, very well said, Bill. Thank you. So I just want to end by thanking everyone for joining us tonight, and a big thank you to all of our panelists. If anybody watching has any questions or anything that we didn't answer, please feel free to contact the admissions office. And for those of you who are just beginning this school search process, we really encourage you to come to campus, visit us, meet us, see for yourself firsthand what really does set our community apart. We'll be hosting our second Pride Perspective next week on Thursday. So that's October 27th, same time at 7 p.m. And our topic then will be on our practicum for civic leadership. We touched a little bit on that tonight, so obviously we'll expand on that topic. So we hope you can join us. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you again and have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.